Hello everyone, welcome to Coding Alley. In this tutorial, we're going to have a look at variables in general. We'll see how we define them and really try to understand why we need them in the first place. So let's get started. So this is the setup that I frequently use when I'm writing short Python programs. I have a terminal open and I divide it into two parts. On the left side, I write code and I execute that code on the right side. You can use whatever setup you're comfortable with. So talking about variables, what are they exactly? Well, variables are a way for us to store data in a program, right? So maybe you want to write a program that takes in the radius of a circle and print its area. When you take this input, the program needs a way to store it so that you can use it later, and that's where variables come in. Now, I said a lot of things here, but let's dive into code so that we can understand it better. I'm going to create a file here called variables.py. Let's start by learning how to define variables first, and then we'll try to understand the motivation behind them. In Python, it's very easy to define variables. All you have to do is just write the name. So for example, x equal to 5. When you type this expression, Python will define a variable called x and then store the value 5 in it. Actually, technically speaking, it will reserve a memory location for us, but we don't have to go into that detail at the moment. For now, just know that writing this expression here will declare a variable called x, and 5 will be assigned to x. And now you can use this variable in the program. So let's also print it. Let's save this file and then try to run this program. And sure enough, Python printed 5 for us. We can define more variables here. For example, let's say radius equal to 10. Let's also print it. And also name equal to Coding Alley. Let's print name as well. And then save the file. Then we're going to say Python variables.py. And then as you see, we get 5 from the variable x here. Then we get 10 from the variable radius. And then finally we get Coding Alley from the variable name. Now if you see, I use double quotes in Coding Alley. This is because Coding Alley is a string, or in common terminology, a text. And when you deal with strings, you always enclose them in quotes. In Python, it doesn't matter if it's double quotes or single quotes. Now if you see, we're just using the name of the variables and assigning it a value. Right? So for example, x equal to 5, name equal to Coding Alley. We're not telling here what the type of the value is, right? At one point, we're assigning an integer value, right? So 5 is an integer, and another time we're assigning a string value to it, right? So Coding Alley is a string, and we're assigning a string value to name. This is where Python becomes very powerful. You do not have to tell Python what the type of the variable is. Is it an integer, a string, or any other type? You can just assign the value to the variable, and Python will automatically determine its type based on the value. So when I say x equal to 5, Python will say, hey, this value 5 is an integer, so let me define the type of x as integer. When I say name equal to Coding Alley, Python will say, hey, Coding Alley is a string, so let me define name to be of type string. And it doesn't stop here. You can assign different values to the same variable, and Python will automatically handle the type conversion for you. So we had defined x equal to 5 here, and because 5 was an integer, x is also an integer. But we can now say x equal to hello. And because hello is a string, x now becomes of type string. Let's also print it. just to be sure. We're going to save the file and then run it. And sure enough, we get hello. So with Python, we can redeclare variables even if it was initially declared before. That was a lot about variables. Now let's try to understand why would we need them in a program. Let me close this file and then create a new one. Okay, so in order to understand the need for variables, let's try to write a program that prints the area of a square. The program is very straightforward. Area is just side into side. And for our case, let's say it's 5 times 5. Let's print the area as well. We're going to save the file. And then I'm going to say Python variables 2.py. And sure enough, Python printed 25 for us. But notice that this program will always output 25. For every change in length of side of the square, we will have to edit the program and update the side. So if the length changes to 15, we're gonna have to change the program, save it, and then run it again. So this program is not really useful in its current form. How do you change it to make it more useful? If you notice, the changing entity in the program is the length. So let's define a variable that will store this value for us. Let's call it side, and let's assign it the value 15. And now that we have the variable side, area can just be side times side. But this itself is not enough. Even after we make this change, we're still hard coding the value 15 here, right? So what we ideally want is for the user to be able to input the value. So instead of saying side equal to 15, we're going to say side equal to input. And we're going to say enter length of side of the square. Now it just so happens that input is a function and it always returns a string, but side needs to be an integer, right? So what we're going to do is say, hey, whatever is the output of input, I want to convert that into an integer. Now if you don't understand it, don't worry, we'll be covering this in later videos. But for now, all this says is that Python will prompt the user to enter the length of the side of the square, and then we're going to convert it into an integer and store it in the variable side. Then we're going to calculate the area and then print it. So let's save the file and then run the program. As we run the program, we see Python prompts us to enter the length of the side of square. So let's say this is 5 and Python printed the area 25 for us. Let's run the program again, and this time let's try 25, and sure enough, Python printed the area 625. So what did we do here? From our initial program, we tried to identify what was varying, and then we used variables to store that varying quantity. In our case, the length was varying, so we defined a variable called side and used that to store the value. We made this program dynamic by allowing the user to enter the side of the square. I hope this example made it clearer as to why you would want to use variables in a program. What are your thoughts on this? Comment below and I would love to read them. That's all about variables. Let's move on to homework now. There's only one task today. You need to write a program that calculates the area of a rectangle. Be sure to take inputs from the user. If you want more practice, you can refer to the practice sheet in the description below. That's it for this tutorial. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share the video if you liked it. You can also support this content by pledging on Patreon. Thanks a lot for watching. See you next time.